If you can't beat them by playing fair, then cheat, cheat, cheat your way to victory.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another set review for V-BT10 Phantom Dragon Aeon. Previously we already discussed the cards for Shadow Paladin as well as for Tachikaze, so today we're tackling the rugby players themselves, or better known as the cheating masters of Vanguard, Spike Brothers. And Spike Brothers got a very interesting new playstyle with this set, as Rising Nova makes its return and it has a very special treat in their particular force capabilities. So with that said, let's dive straight into the new cards for Spike Brothers, as there is a lot to cover for today. And of course we're gonna start off with the reprint triggers, and Spike Brothers got two different reprint critical triggers, and both of them are gonna be 1 star as they're just generic reprints. With that said, they also got a brand new heal trigger, which is finally Cheergirl Adelaide. Sadly it's just a 1 star as we already have a heal trigger, but it's glad to see her back, because every Spike Brother player couldn't wait any longer without her. Now Adelaide isn't the only new Cheergirl trigger, as they also got a new draw trigger in the likes of Cheergirl Pauline, and this is gonna be a 3 star as it is another addition to the draw trigger lineup for the clan. Now the final new trigger in this set they got was the new Sentinel critical trigger in the likes of Liar Lips, and this is of course a 5 star trigger as it's just a new type of Sentinel critical which every clan now finally is going to get, which is pretty nice. Now on top of that they also of course going to get a new starter, and this time that is running Sniper, but it's a 1 star as it's just a generic starter. And of course they also got a new vanilla card, and this time they've got the grade 1 15k shield vanilla in the like of Mecha Referee, and this Mecha unit isn't in the same ballpark of Mecha Trainer, so of course this is going to be a 1 star. Now that we've done all the generic stuff, let's dive into the cards with actual skills, and the first one that we're going to tackle is this grade 1 called Mecha Manager, and its ability is act on rearguard circle, cost, rest this unit, one of your other rearguards get power plus 10k until the end of turn, and at the end of the battle, that unit attacked, put that unit on the bottom of your deck. So this is a really easy way to give any type of rearguard an extra 10k power, and this somewhat synergizes with different mechanics within Spike Brothers. There are some cards that at the end of the battle either put them into the soul or maybe back to the deck, maybe some retire themselves, but I'm not sure if we have that in Spike Brothers, but Spike Brothers have cards that remove themselves from the field at the end of battle. So if you combine that with Mecha Trainer, you actually get some extra value without losing more units. But on top of that, it also synergizes with mechanics like High Speed Brekkie or Juggernaut Maximum, because sometimes you're out of extra copies to call next turn once they activate their skill. So with a card like Mecha Manager, you can actually put those copies back into the deck so you have more targets to hit with other abilities. So overall, I think it's a solid 3 star card, as it is a nice extra card that can help you to give you more pressure power in the early game, and it's synergized with different mechanics within the clan. Now another generic card which is actually pretty good is this grade 2 Breach Spurt, and its abilities on a rearguard circle, when it attacks a Vanguard, cost, put a normal unit from your drop zone on the bottom of your deck, and until the end of the battle, your opponent's unit must intercept. At the end of the battle, put this unit into your soul and draw a card. So this is the card that forces your opponent to intercept with all their units, which can give you a lot of value. But its cost is actually something that you want to do in Spike Brothers to fuel your combo potential in the late game. And on top of that, this card also synergizes with Mecha Manager, as you can give this card the extra 10k power if you want to do that, and then at the end of that battle you can either put them on the bottom of the deck or in the soul, but no matter what you choose, you still will get that draw, which is actually pretty good in synergy wise, but the inherent ability that it forces your opponent to intercept is already really strong. But all the extra things on top of this card makes this card a solid 4 star card in my opinion, as it can be a really good tech choice for any type of Spike Brother deck that wants to have that extra rearguard removal to their disposal. Now another very unique grade 2 that we have for Spike Brothers is Assaulting Barbarians, and this card has a skill, continues a Guardian Circle. This unit gets shield plus 5k for each force marker on your circles. So the longer the game progresses, the more and more shield this unit becomes. The good part about the skill is that it doesn't matter how you get it onto the Guardian Circle. It doesn't necessarily have to be placed from hand, it doesn't necessarily have to intercept from the field, so at least if it's on the Guardian Circle, you will get extra shield value out of it. Sadly, it's only a defensive option and nothing offensive about the card, but There is a glimmer of hope for this card thanks to the interaction for the upcoming Rising Nova card, as that card allows you to accelerate the amount of force markers you create. So if you stay long enough in the game, this card can easily attain an extra 10k shield, 20k shield, 30k shield, and then suddenly this is a lot of value because it almost becomes as strong and potentially even stronger than the critical sentinels without sacrificing your trigger spots or sentinel spots for such a shield power. So with that in mind and the potential of the card, I'm allowing it to bump up from a 1-star to a 2-star as there is potential usefulness for this card, but probably not in a competitive scene and mostly for budget builds. Now, another very peculiar grade 2, once again, is this grade 2 Meteoric Panthera, and its ability is continuous Vanguard to rearguard circle. If 2 or more rearguards were called by your card's ability this turn, this unit gets power plus 10k. This is going to be a 1-star for me because it's reliant on other effects, and you need to superior call multiple cards, and then it only gets 10k power, and it's also a 9k base. That's not enough reason to actually play this card to make it good in my honest opinion, so that's why it's just a 1-star. Now, to round up the generic support cards, we've got, of course, the Great Researcher in the likes of Acrobat Verdi. And it obviously has the Great Researcher skill, but its unique way to get 5k power is continuous Vanguard to rearguard circle. If a rearguard was called by a card's ability this turn, this unit gets power plus 5k. That's very easy to fulfill on every single turn for the entirety of the match. So it's a pretty good booster, attacker, and it's the Great Researcher, and it's going to be even more important with the upcoming Rising Nova deck. So it's definitely a 5-star card for me. Now we got some couple of cards that could be seen as generic support cards, but they work even better in combination with General Seyfried. As the first of those cards is this grade 1 Outside Rabbit, and its ability is Auto Rearguard Circle. When placed by a card's ability cost, Soul Blast 1, until the end of turn, this unit can attack the Vanguard from the back row and it gets power plus 5k. So the reason why I say this is Seyfried's support is that if you have this thing in your hand, you can call it to the field, then utilize Seyfried's effect to put the rabbit into the soul and superior call another copy onto the field. By doing that, you forcefully activate its condition, and because you put that rabbit into the soul, means you can then Soul Blast that rabbit to also fulfill for its cost. So it works perfectly with Seyfried, and it also gets an extra 10k power, making it a 22k unit from the back row that can attack from the back row, which allows it to actually do some decent pressure on your opponent. So overall, I think it's a solid 3-star card, as it works really good with Seyfried, but it can also function in some generic Spike Brother deck that allows you to superior call specific units to the field. Now, the next card that follows this line is this grade 1 Cheer Girl Courtney, and her ability is Auto Rearguard Circle. When placed by a card's ability, if your damage zone has no face-up cards, counter charge 1. So once again, this is somewhat of a Seyfried support card, because the ability to put the unit into the soul, then superior call another copy of it onto the field and give it 10k power, plus the Vanguard 10k power, costs a counterblast. So if you combine it with Cheer Girl Courtney, you can actually do that whole thing for no counterblast if it was this last counterblast, as you immediately countercharge. And if you have multiple copies of Cheer Girl Courtney, you can actually keep doing that a couple of turns to give your Vanguard a lot of power if you want to go for a final turn, or you have a condition that forces you to superior call multiple cards to the field, then you can forcefully do that via that interaction. So overall, I think it's a solid 3-star card, as it's a good countercharge engine that can synergize with already present things in the clan and could become even better in the future with more support. Now, the final card of this lineup for Seyfried support is this grade 2 Defensive Evil Hater, and its ability is Auto Rearguard Circle. When placed by a card's ability, costs counterblast 1, and this unit gets power plus 15k until the end of turn. So this is for me a 1-star card, because not only does it need to be placed via an effect, so you already need to utilize resources or other cards to enable this effect, but the payout is that you then need to pay another counterblast to just gain 15k power. I do not think that one counterblast is equal to 15k power, especially in the fact that you need to jump through some hoops to even get to that point. So that's why it's definitely a 1-star card for me. Now, with that small support for Seyfried and some, you could say, generic support for Spike Brothers, let's dive into the new Rising Nova, because the new Rising Nova is gonna work with multiple grade 3s, and we've got a couple of grade 3s in this set as well. So we're gonna first take a look at Nova, and then we're gonna take a look at these other grade 3s, as well as some direct support cards for grade 3s. So here we have the new VR grade 3, which is Exceptional Expertise Rising Nova. And that name is kind of redundant, because if you are if you have an expertise about something, then that's probably already exceptional. So yeah, sure, fine. But his abilities are Continuous Vanguard Circle. when this unit would get imaginary gift force, due to being placed by riding, get both 1 and 2 instead of 1 or 2. So basically, if you ride Rising Nova, you can acquire both imaginary gift markers, which is pretty good. But keep in mind, the moment that you ride into another grade 3, then you need to choose if you want to go for Force 1 or Force 2 for the rest of the game, but every single time that you ride a Rising Nova, you will still acquire both. So that allows you to basically give any unit an extra 10k power and an extra inherent critical, or you can spread them. But that doesn't really have to be the case because of Rising Nova's second ability, as that's Act on Vanguard Circle, cost Soul Blast 1, choose up to 2 of your grade 3 rearguards, and this unit gets all of their abilities until the end of turn. This ability may only be used by cards with the same card name once a turn. So that once per turn clause is on there so that you do not copy himself plus another grade 3, and then once again himself plus another grade 3, and then again himself another. That's basically to stop preventing you from going somewhat infinite. So for one Soul Blast, you can copy the effects of 2 other grade 3s. And some grade 3s have 2 effects, so there's a possibility that you gain 4 extra skills on top of Rising Nova. But keep in mind, it only can use their Vanguard skills, as your Rising Nova is of course on the Vanguard Circle. So the 2 main suspects of good targets for Rising Nova is of course the previous VRs. We have Bull Spike and we have General Seyfried. So the previous Seyfried support card that we just discussed could actually then therefore work with Rising Nova. And then that interaction with the countercharge of grade 1 to just reuse her multiple times a turn becomes a lot more apparent if we also incorporate Bull Spike, because Bull Spike also has a non-on-hit and on-hit potential, and with the Force 1 and Force 2 markers means that you also get an inherent critical on top of that. So there's a lot of possibilities here. And with Bull Spike in the mix, that means that Force 1 and Force 2 that you put on one circle, you can then suddenly move them around from left column to right column to the Vanguard Circle over and over and over again. So that in itself allows Rising Nova to do all kinds of shenanigan plays. But we got even more grade 3s in this set, so let's discuss those grade 3s as well as the supporting cast around this grade 3 mechanic, and then we come back to Rising Nova to see how good this card is going to be. So the main support guy for the Rising Nova deck is this double R grade 3 spiking Cyclone, and its abilities are Continuous Vanguard Circle. During your turn, this unit gets power plus 5k for each force marker on your circles. If he's your Vanguard unit, he gains an extra 5k power, which is pretty nice. But if we copy his skill with Rising Nova, that means that Rising Nova gets an extra 10k because you have Force 1 and Force 2 on the very first ride. That on top of the Force 1 marker means that your Rising Nova will already be a 33k unit with double critical without any other skill by just acquiring this particular continuous effect. That's already pretty decent. But Spiking Cyclone has another effect which is really good. It says Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, cost counter plus 1 and stand one of your rear guards. So just on attack, you can resend a unit. That means you will have 4 attacks in the Force Clan, and the scene that you can move those markers if you combine it with Bull Spike is pretty nuts. But if you combine it with General Seyfried, then you have a potential on-hit skill that can resend something else. So you could go potentially for 5 attacks, but that require you to hit with your Vanguard. So there's an on-hit in that mix. So Spiking Cyclone already is a really good card with Seyfried. But even on its own, it's actually a pretty decent low-budget boss unit. This is a double R. That is a pretty good unit that just gives a force deck a 4 of attack, and it can make itself as a good beater. So overall, I think this is a really good 5-star card because it's a really good budget deck alternative. And on top of that, it even makes the whole Rising Nova deck as devastating as it potentially can be thanks to that extra restand. Now, if we go down to the even lower rarities of the grade 3s, we see Big Back Warlord. And this particular grade 3 has the abilities Continuous Vanguard Circle. During the battle it attacked, when your opponent would call cards from his or her hand to the Guardian Circle, he or she must call 2 or more at the same time. So it basically has a Battle Door effect and could give them to Rising Nova, but this isn't really that interesting because you probably are hitting for high numbers, which will already force multiple cards. The only upside to this is that if they're gonna PG your Vanguard, they need to ditch 1 extra card. That's the only extra advantage you're going to generate from this skill. Then its second ability is a rearguard ability, which is Continuous Rearguard Circle. If your circles have a force marker 1 and 2, this unit gets Intercept and Auto. When Intercept, this unit gets shield plus 10k until the end of battle. So it basically becomes a 10k interceptor, which is actually pretty decent. Now, the upside to this grade 3 than most other grade 3s with Rising Nova is that it has a rearguard effect. Rising Nova require you to have the rearguards onto the rearguard circle so you can copy their effects. Meaning, those units are most likely just 13k vanillas that don't do anything. Now, having a card like this that also has a rearguard ability at least gives you something for having them on a rearguard circle. The only downside is that its Vanguard ability is kind of and its rearguard ability is also kind of So, yeah, it doesn't really make the card all the better. And the fact that it also has a force marker, which doesn't really come up all that often, makes it not that great of a card. So I will give it a 2-star rating. It's probably just a low budget option for your Rising Nova deck. Now, another new grade 3 that we have for Rising Nova is Punting Cannon. And its abilities act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, cost put a card from your hand into the soul, which can be really nice. Look at the same number of cards from the top of your deck as the number of your grade 3 units. Call up to one card from among them to the rearguard circle, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order, and the called unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So this allows you to turn a card in your hand in potentially something else that is in the top 3 of your deck. And the reason why I say top 3 is if you combine this with Rising Nova, you will have your Vanguard and 2 grade 3 rearguards with no Rising Nova to make it actually work. So in that case, you can potentially get a grade 1 out of those cards that could give you something else. And this could then combine with, let's say for example, the Rabbit, that then turns into a 22k back row attacker, which could be nice. But by doing that, that means you sacrifice the potential boosters for your other grade 3s. But putting it behind your Vanguard might not be that bad, as you can still acquire those force markers onto units to hit for decent numbers. And you could potentially even move those force markers to the back row to this Rabbit to allow it to be even more powerful. So there are some interesting things that you can do with this card in combination with the other effects that you have in Spike Brothers. But overall, I think it's still a 2-star card, as you will have better options to copy with Rising Nova. And even this as a standalone unit is kind of meh, because you cannot even build a deck around this thing, as that means you need to run a lot of extra junky grade 3s that probably won't really interact well if you don't also run Rising Nova. Now, the last new grade 3 that we've got in this set is Bullet Liner, and its ability is very simple. Continues a Vanguard to rearguard circle. During a turn, if this unit circle has a force marker, this unit gets power plus 10k. So in combination with the force 1 and the force 2, it basically turns into a 33k unit with double critical. And if you then combine this with your Rising Nova, that means the Rising Nova also gets another 10k. So it basically gives you extra beaters on the side column as well as Vanguard Circle. This is arguably the better grade 3 that has a Vanguard as well as Rearguard Circle skill, as it makes your units hit for decent numbers and gives you options to do some other things with your back row. But if we ignore Rising Nova and we just look at this card as a singular unit, it doesn't really do that much. And for that, I just can give it only 2 stars. It's just a beater. It's a good beater, but being a beater is not good enough. Now, with the grade 3 discussed, let's take a look at the supporting cast around this engine. As relying on grade 3s isn't good enough, you need to have ways to get consistent access to those grade 3s at all times. Yes, Acrobat Verdi is something, but it's not good enough to make this whole deck actually work. And one of those cards to make this deck go towards the end is Ambush Dexter. This grade 1 has the abilities Auto and Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost discard a card from your hand and draw a card. So, very simple cycle effect. Then its second effect is Auto Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost counter plus 1 and put a grade 2 or greater rearguard into your soul. Search your deck for up to 2 cards with the same grade as the card put into your soul for this cost, come to the rearguard circle and shuffle your deck. So this effect is basically the same as what we've seen in the GRR for Zodiac Time Beast, which is of course a skill for Split Pegasus. Now this effect is actually pretty good, as it allows you to turn any grade 2 into 2 grade 2s or any grade 3 into 2 grade 3s, and it doesn't have to be the same, so you can make some match between the cards that you need for the certain situation. And in the case that you go into Rising Nova and you have a grade 3 in your hand, you can turn that grade 3 into the 2 grade 3s that you need, as long as you have those cards into your deck, which you probably will, as seen Spike Brothers can easily reload the deck with the cards that you need. So this ups the consistency of getting to your plays towards Rising Nova. And it can even be utilized outside of Rising Nova, as it allows you to fetch your grade 2s. And because this card can superior call any type of card, means it can even activate those other cards that have specific unplays via skills effect. So this can actually be a really good card to add onto your offensive plays as well as your card advantage engine. So for that, I think it's a solid 4-star card. Okay, I'm gonna stop myself there for a moment, because I was about to give this card a 4-star rating, which is severely underselling the power potential of this card. The issue is that even though I gave you the reasons that this card could be seen as a generic support card, I was mainly in the mindset of it being a Rising Nova card. And yes, in a Rising Nova setting, then it being a 4-star is pretty good in its own right. But this card is so much more than that. It's insanely powerful as it can give you a lot of plays. It allows you to get any type of grade 2s out of your decks. It allows you to get any type of grade 3s out of your deck. So no matter what type of game plan we might have, this can help you to get to the consistency of that play. But on top of that, this allows you to be very aggressive in the early game. Because on a turn 2 play, what you can potentially do is turn a grade 2 from your hand into 2 Brockies, which will get their place effect activated. So on your turn 2, you will have a 10k Vanguard swing, a 20k Brockie swing, and a 28k Brockie swing with the booster behind it. Which allows you to beat over multiple defensive triggers in the early game, while your opponent is maybe at an 8k base as the grade 1. But the following turn, while it's your first grade 3 turn, you could potentially do this similar play, but then with a grade 3, and then utilize something like the Juggernaut Maximum. And that's just looking at Brockie and Juggernaut Maximum as an example. This card opens up the playing field for so many insane early aggression plays, as consistency bumps to whatever play you might have for your main engine, which makes this an insane card. As the previous me said before, it is a split Pegasus on a grade 1, which is generic. That's insane. So yeah, it's pretty obvious that I'm not gonna give it a 4-star, but a well-deserved 5-star. This card is really good. Now, with that said, back to past me. Now the final card for the Spike Brothers engine, and is also another piece to the grade 1 that we just talked about, is this grade 2, Adorbs Perona. And her ability is Auto and Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost counterblast 1, search your deck for up to 1 grade 3, call to the Rearguard Circle, and shuffle your deck. And her second effect is continuous Rearguard Circle. If you have a grade 3 unit in the same column as this unit gets boost. So not only does it allow you to fetch a grade 3 onto the field, it also allows you to boost that grade 3. So suddenly it makes a magic number as it becomes 23. And seeing as you're mainly going to rely on your grade 3s, having a grade 2 that can also boost is actually pretty nice, because your grade 2s are suddenly becoming less and less important because you're relying on your grade 3s. But if you combine this grade 2 together with the grade 1 we just talked about, you can suddenly, out of nowhere, for 2 counterblasts, set up your entire engine for Rising Nova. Because you can call this grade 2, counterblast 1, and search a grade 3. Then you can use the grade 1 to put that grade 3 into the soul, and then search out 2 other grade 3s. And suddenly you have 2 grade 3s onto the board for Rising Nova to copy their skill, even though you had no grade 3s in your hand, but you did have this card and the grade 1. So suddenly you can see the options that you have to make the deck consistent. Either you have a grade 3 and a grade 1, or you have the grade 1 and this grade 2, or you have 2 grade 3s besides your Vanguard, of course. So there are definitely more consistent ways to getting to your plays, even though Rising Nova on its own might sound a little bit inconsistent. With that in mind, I once again think this is a solid 4-star card, as it's a plus engine that searches through your deck, and it can also be a solid booster. And this can work in any type of Spike Brother deck, because if you play something like Juggernaut Maximum, which is just a giant beater, you can search out that Juggernaut Maximum, it gets the 10k power, so it's already a 23k unit, and this suddenly becomes a 10k booster for that. So out of nowhere, you have a 33k column. And you can do this also on turn 2, when this thing is your Vanguard, so you can ride this thing, and you can call down a Juggernaut Maximum on the side columns, and be very aggressive in the early game. So there's a lot of potential for this card, and for that reason, it's a solid 4-star card in my opinion that can be utilized in any type of deck. Now, with every support card around Rising Nova discussed, let's go back to Rising Nova to have an understanding of how powerful this card can actually be. First off, his first passive ability is insanely strong. Allowing to generate both markers is pretty nuts, as it means you get best of both worlds, and that is something that we haven't seen before. But on top of that, Having the ability to copy any 2 cards' effects is really strong. We've seen this in the past time and time again. Those type of cards are probably the strongest cards and need to be built around to not break them in any type of capacity. That's the same case with Rising Nova. This card is going to be stronger and stronger the more support Spike Brothers is going to get. And yes, its ability might sound inconsistent because you need to have those Great Freeze specifically on the field. So if you do not get to them, this card might actually do nothing. But as we've seen, with the Grade 1 and a Grade 2 allowing us to fetch those Great Freeze, and also our Great Freeze Searcher, and potentially other cards we might get in the future that allows us to get consistent access to our deck, means that this card can only become better and better and better as the game progresses, and it's now already a pretty good card. Because the 3 cards that work perfectly with this is Spiking Cyclones, and of course the previous VR General Seyfried, as well as Bull Spike. So what you're probably going to see is a combination of these 3 cards, with mostly Spiking Cyclone being one of the 2 options, as just getting that extra power and that consistent extra rearguard swing is really powerful. So with that all in mind, I think Rising Nova is a very obvious 5-star card. You might not agree at this point, but this card changes everything for Spike Brothers for the rest of the support lineup. Because every single Great Freeze they're now going to make for Spike Brothers, they have to keep in mind that this card exists. And also, if they're going to stay with markers in a new era, there's also the question of why would you play that new VR or that new main unit if Rising Nova can just create 2 markers instead of 1 and it can copy its abilities. There's no reason why you would never pick something else over Rising Nova, as Rising Nova can just take that, what they have, and do it better. So yeah, very obviously, Rising Nova, 5-star card. And with that, we conclude the set review for Spike Brothers. As we've seen, a very interesting new line of support cards, as we've got some generic support, but the main attraction is, of course, to Rising Nova with its unique mechanic to copy Great Freeze abilities, as well as generating both Force 1 and Force 2 at the same time. This is something pretty unique, and it also sets a precedent for the future potential of the clan, as long as Bushiroad is going to support Spike Brothers and not try to do some loopholes what they did in the past with Gear Groovy. But that's something that only the future can tell us, as we have no idea what they have in store for Spike Brothers. But with that said, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of this new support for Spike Brothers. I know it's not the most favorite clan out there, but they do have some really interesting options and really interesting playstyles to their disposal, which not a lot of other clans actually can do. So let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. This video has been brought to you by my lovely Patreons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.